wrestling fans, we're here. Legends of the Ring, the final interview for BrutalTruthRadio.com, and we have finally gotten and stalked him down, the guest that we have always wanted to get. He's indeed my favorite wrestler, and we finally have him here, and I want to do the intro right. Wrestling fans, welcome to another edition of the Brutal Truth Radio, and my guest today is probably one of the greatest heels of all time, except for the original Sheik, maybe, and he'll tell us that himself. He is the master of darkness, the prince of darkness. He is Kevin Sullivan.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm even on the top 100 heels, but the greatest heel of all time was the Sheik, the original Sheik. And there's been the other great heels, Mark Lewin. I can go on and on and on. But just to be mentioned in the name of the Sheik means something to me because he was my mentor. And I think Terry Funk is here this weekend. A lot of the heels from my generation are here, and we all talk about the Sheik because everybody that was a vicious heel stole from the Sheik, but we didn't steal as good as the original. So whether it would be Sabu, myself, Funk, we all were somewhat of a carbon copy of the Sheik.
Now, see, I've had the privilege to meet all of those guys except you, Mr. Sullivan. You're the one who's always seemed to evade me. And ever since back in the day when I was a young kid, I'm 42 years old, so I go back a while.
Yeah.
Like I was telling the kids on the way up here, my mother wouldn't allow the magazine when you were, Satan Was My Manager,
Yeah.
when it was the album cover with you on it. My mother was a born-again Christian in upstate New York. That magazine wasn't allowed in my house because you struck that kind of fear and sweet people like my mom. So to me, you were the heel of my generation because the Sheik was just a little bit before me.
Well, the thing about that cover of that magazine, I never have used the word ever in an interview, the word Satan. I never used that word. And I never brought religion into the interviews. The magazine, to sell hype magazines, did that. And they didn't want to take the flack. And I still, you can't hold grudges and life's too short. But one time they said, well, we can't get you on the cover again because of that article. Well, I didn't write that article, and I never said that. And the thing, and I happen to be very into religion. And the thing that I question about religion, and I probably shouldn't be even into this because this is not what we want. But if you don't, George Collins' old story, my God's dick is bigger than your God's dick. So if you don't believe the way I do, you're wrong. I mean, so, but I understand the thing about the satanic thing and how the magazines pushed it and hyped it to sell for their own profit. But my thing was a more mystical thing. I was on that line without having to say it. People knew what I was talking about, but I wouldn't go out and say it.
Right. And I think that was very important because to me, you were. It was an era of bigger men too. So you were a smaller man who would be able to get by. It was believable that Kevin Sullivan could not only like mess with your mind, but he could get in the ring and give you a beatdown. The double stomp that I've seen you give many times to the stomach. I can imagine a lot of young kids quit wrestling the day after they got in a match with you. But it was the psychology of what you did. And I was in upstate New York. You were down in Florida doing this, and the Bible Belt of America.
Yeah.
I mean, there had to be times when people like gave you a hard time about it.
Well, we talked about this last line in another interview. The reason why it worked, I was lucky enough to have great baby faces to work with, and who put all egos aside. And I always equated to the Alien, the original Alien.
Right.
When the alien jumps out the guy's chest and you're horrified. Well, if a guy took out a fly swatter and swatted at the alien, the movie's over.
Right.
How did that alien get from this big to as big as the ship? It was in the person's mind, the perception. So I had guys like Blackjack Mulligan, Dusty Rhodes, Barry Windham, Mike Graham, Andre the Giant, Hogan flopping for me, guys who were 3 times my size that got the perception of this guy's ultimate evil, and all it is perception. So it was baby faces putting away their ego, and that's what we talked about before. That was a very unusual thing my career. We had, in that era, we had to work together a little bit closer.
Right, right. Now, Kevin, what we do on the Brutal Truth usually is we do a 20-question format. Okay, I don't have it written down, so I'm going to try to go. The first one's simple, of course. Where are you from, sir?
I'm from Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And how did you get your start in pro wrestling?
I wrestled amateur, and it was a crazy thing. I liked pro wrestling as a kid, but I never thought I'd do it. And when I was wrestling amateur, and I wrestled at the Boston YMCA Union. It's the second oldest athletic club in the country. And I happened to be working out with a guy, and he said, "Hey, you want to work out?" And the guy was from South Africa. His family were the Berries, which owned the second largest diamond mines in South Africa. And this guy just wanted to become a professional wrestler, but he couldn't because of his aristocratic standard over there.
Right.
And he wrestled some in some smaller clubs and said, "You want to try it?" And I tried it, and that was it.
You got bit by the bug.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Now, do you remember? You weren't trained, were you? I mean, like per se, like they are now. You didn't go to a school. There was none of that.
School. My first match was because I had wrestled amateur. I knew that some of the things in professional wrestling had to be choreographed because it just didn't work. But no one smartened me up, and I kept on saying to myself, surely before my first match they're going to do something. So they got me there that afternoon, and they said, "We're going to go through some things at half speed, and this is a business, nobody gets hurt." But I was getting ready for my match and to get the finish, and nobody came over to me. And I said, "Can this be real?" And during the match, I guess I was a little snug, you know. The guy said, "You gotta loosen up." And he talked me through it. And when it was time for the finish, he put me into a small package, and you know, I beat him 1, 2, 3, and he kicked out, and they went back, and he said, "I think you can do this," and they didn't smart me up, so it was a whole different era then.
Yeah.